But I think that people often get into these fields thinking that either they're going to make a lot of money or that it's going to be this cure-all fix to people's problems. I know a lot of massage therapists for sure get into it because they want a flexible schedule.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. Really potent questions can bring a feeling of fear or dread. They unanchor from the safe moorings of the known. Good questions, they're looking for trouble. What is up around that bend? Just why is it we're not supposed to eat a certain food or behave a particular way or believe the central tenet story of the group to which we belong? Potent questions are not the oppositional rebellion of an American teenager. They're more like prophets pointing toward another worldview entirely. They are troubling in that you might have to change your life in ways that could leave you unrecognizable to yourself. Potent questions just might dissolve the solidity of your worldview. They should probably come with a warning label. Potent questions will make your family uncomfortable. Your friends might get nervous around them. For sure, they will come and haunt you in the quiet hours of the night because they're like catalytic enzymes. They break and rearrange the bonds that hold the structures of thought and belief in place. Good questions are troublesome enough they easily conjure up the feeling of being stupid. They don't come with easy or pat answers. You might need to change how you think, and this is where it gets tricky because change is an invitation into uncertainty, and the ego would like to look bright and shiny on the answer side of a potent question, but there's no way to guarantee delivery on that. So, any potent question? It also includes, are you willing to find out? You know, there's a good reason why the map makers back during the voyages of discovery would draw a border to the known world and then add the warning, there be dragons here. For sure, at the edge of the known, we lack the capacity to describe it. Transversing the uncharted, it takes a bit of both surrender and courage. The journey, often enough worthwhile. In today's conversation with Jason Brazil, we delve into his process of wanting to better understand the channels by taking his experience as a massage therapist and marrying it to his interest in the acupuncture channel system. He's got some keen insights gleaned from looking through the lens of the dual clock opposites, and he's charted out what he discovered on that voyage of discovery. We'll get into that in a moment. Stay with us. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AcuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Geological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lau, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Welcome to Shop Talk. In this portion of the podcast, we are bringing you roughly 15 minutes of practical, clinical methods, perspectives, and advice that has its work boots on. This section is all about practical material that you can begin to investigate the next time that you walk into clinic. Additionally, visit the show notes page for supporting materials from this week's guest on Shop Talk. All right, roll up your sleeves. Let's get to work. Today in Shop Talk, I'd like to spend a little time talking with you about cultivation. You know, we often talk about cultivation as an important part of being a practitioner. And as you're listening to this, perhaps you'll find yourself in agreement that cultivation, developing who we are, it's an important aspect of practicing acupuncture. I'd like to take a moment now to invite you to think about the first 3 things that come to mind when you think about cultivation in service of being a better practitioner. Pause here for just a moment. Don't think too hard about it. Just notice the first 3 things that pop into your mind. I suspect the things that just came to mind, either there are things that you're doing or things that you think you should be doing. And I wonder how many of you came up with running a business on your short list of cultivated practices. I found in the years that I've had the good fortune to practice acupuncture that running my own practice has been instrumental in keeping me honest, showing me where my blind spots are and where I'm fearful, and perhaps most in particular, where I'm unskilled or I'm clumsy. I found that running my own business requires me to be accountable in ways that I could easily avoid if I was an employee, and that the residual issues that I've had with money, power, and authority from my youth, they've shown up in countless ways in my clinical work until I realized that money was not inherently bad, but rather my lack of ability to make it. It colored my attitude toward it. That appropriate power abdicated is actually a kind of misuse of power, and that authority is not always corrupt or self-serving. There are those places where, because of our education, because of our experience, we carry a certain authority, and how we carry that and what we do with it, that makes all the difference. Running a business is not something separate from the practice of medicine. This might be one of the biggest learnings that I've had over the years. I thought the most important thing was learning to be a good practitioner, like being good in clinic, like knowing my clinical stuff. For a long time, I thought running a practice was a sideline. It was the thing that, oh, you got to do this so I can do the other thing, i.e. having a clinical practice. But it turns out running a business is not at all separate from the practice of medicine. It's actually an integrated aspect of the clinical work, and it's helped me to remove the false assumption that business and medicine were two separate things. Just like we see the mind and the body as a connected whole, the practice of medicine and the business of medicine, it's actually an integrated whole. Having a business will at some point lead you to your uncomfortable blind spots. It'll put you dead in the crosshairs of your fears. Trust me, I know this. Running a business will ask you to be accountable to yourself and to others with an honesty that at times you're not sure that you got. And it'll show you the attitudes, beliefs, and misconceptions that are sorely in need of an update. And all too easily glossed over with the thought of, I hate business and I'm no good at it and I shouldn't have to do this and I wish I could just practice medicine and not have to muck with business. But I found that there is a lot in this world that I hated. And I hated it maybe first and foremost because I wasn't good at it. What's more, I wasn't willing to learn. I haven't found it very easy to look at personal deficiency dead in the eye and decide to own it or do something about it. Which is why I think it is indeed true that as an acupuncturist, we need to attend to our self-cultivation, absolutely, because many of the obstacles that are in the way of a successful practice, we put them there ourselves. I want to take a glimpse at a few that have been my teachers over the years. These are mostly in the form of questions because I find that questions are a lot more useful than answers a lot of the time, because the problem with answers is that you stop questioning and you stop looking to see what else might be there. So I hope that you'll find these questions I have here to be helpful in your ongoing inquiry. So first, let's talk about success. It's a big one, isn't it? Success. Ooh, a lot of us, I suspect, have some real emotional juice around that one. So what about success? What does success look like to you? Does success have a money goal? Is there a social good goal, a kind of status that you're hoping others will grant to you? Does success mean that you've got a kind of acceptance in your family or your friend group? And can you name what would be around you, what your life would look like when success has arrived? What does it feel like? What does success for you feel like? What are the emotions that you would constantly live within? What do your relationships look like? And what do they feel like? And maybe even more to the point, how would you sleep different if you had success? What feelings that are troublesomely present now would be diminished or maybe even absent if you had the feelings that go with success? And money, what about money? How much do you need? Is there an arrived number, a number that says, this is enough? Have you sat down with a spreadsheet and run the numbers? And if you have, how did you get to that number? How do you know it's accurate? Maybe even more to the point, because we have to live with ourselves and who we think we are. How do you feel about having the amount of money in the bank or regularly being generated by your practice that you feel like you really need. Again, what is the amount that's enough? And if you had that, how would others who you care about feel about you having that kind of a financial situation? When I first started practicing medicine, I thought, well, Chinese medicine, it can treat anybody, it can treat anything, and I should be able to do that. I've come to find that it's very helpful to know who are the people that you want to work with. Not the people that you think you should work with, but who are the people who actually light you up when they walk into their office? Is there a kind of person that when you see their name on your daily schedule, you feel your stomach drop out a little bit, or you start feeling a little bit anxious? And likewise, are there people when you see their name, you're excited to see them? It makes a difference when you have a practice that you feel good within, and to know that you're serving the kinds of people that you like to serve. And again, maybe you think that you should be capable and willing to serve anybody who walks into your office. That, after all, is what Sun Tzu Miao suggests we do. We should treat anybody, regardless of condition, regardless of finance, regardless of situation. It's a nice image, but I'm not sure that it's actually the best use of my time and skill. I've discovered that there are some folks, I'm pretty good at helping them. Others, even establishing some kind of rapport, it doesn't go so well. If you've got a passion for a certain crowd, then you're likely to be able to serve them pretty well. You know, in marketing, they say, if your product is for everybody, then you've got a nondescript commodity, something that's probably made by the lowest cost producer overseas. It means that you're in a race to the bottom. And I'm not sure that any of us really want to win the low-cost, low-value Olympics. Think for a moment about a product or a service that you're happy to spend your time and your money on. Maybe it's a class you take or a restaurant you love, maybe clothing that makes you happy in your skin. Are you thinking about the money that you spend, or are you thinking about the experience that that money has enabled you to have? We don't trade money for things. We trade money for value. And I know for myself, all too often, I have thought that people spend their money for acupuncture. Really, they're spending their money on the value of what they receive from you and your work. So with that in mind, I invite you to take some time after this little shop talk and consider the value that your patients receive from their perspective. So often we're focused on what we do or the techniques we know and are comfortable using. It's all important, of course, but in the cultivative aspect of business as part of your practice, it's really helpful to understand the value of what your patients are receiving from their point of view. It takes a bit of empathy on our part to understand that. I'll be exploring more about creating a practice that is a unique reflection of you with Brenda Lee on Saturday, June the 24th. This will be a free Ask Us Anything session with two people at different stages of their practice investigating the same question. And then we invite you to join us with any questions or comments that you might have. Visit www.qiological.com/practice to sign up and join us in this conversation. Jason Brazil, welcome to Qiological.
Hello, Michael. So good to be here with you today.
Delighted to have you. Hey, you wrote a book.
I wrote a book.
Why on God's green earth would you write a book? That's a lot of work.
It was about 2 years of work, which from what I've been told is kind of a short time to write a book. And I think maybe the other question that we should ask is, why the hell write a book about East Asian medicine when you're a massage therapist?
That's a great question. Why? Why would you do that? Why?
I've been interested in the subject for quite a long time, and I practice a lot of shiatsu in my bodywork practice. And I was confused as hell about all the interweaving theories and approaches and viewpoints As you know, East Asian medicine is this huge canon of literature and also practice.
Canon. I like how you say canon. I think of it more like a hairball.
Yes. Yeah. It's this multi-layered commentary. I mean, you look at the Unshuld tradition of the Nanjing, and the commentaries over the eons and years. It's like, man, there's so many synonymous viewpoints, but more conflicting viewpoints. And essentially, all these practitioners for the last 2,000 years, 3,000 years have been arguing with each other about what works and what doesn't.
It's wild, isn't it?
It's absolutely wild. And so, as a person who's, I'm really a layperson when you think about it. I happen to have a lot of manual skill and I'm curious, but as far as a scholar, that's not really my strong suit. So, the writing of my book was really a way for me to process and untangle that hairball more than anything. I wanted to present people who may be curious like myself and my clients and maybe other practitioners with a less tangled hairball of East Asian medicine.
That's awesome. Well, one of the things that I always appreciate about people who are taking a run at, swinging at, explaining or in some way communicating about East Asian medicine in an everyday kind of language is it's really tricky because while we might be using words in English, we're using them in different ways than you would usually use them in the common parlance. And so being able to talk about it, we often hear about like lay people as some kind of criticism. Well, that's just a lay person. What the hell do they know? Well, lay people know a lot, right? Because we're just everyday people and we know a lot. We know about what makes our life work. We know about what makes it not work. We're not stupid. We may not be scholars, but we're not stupid. And there's something about simplicity that I think is very powerful. And there's something about, like you were saying, digging into it to unwind it for yourself. I mean, it's a super generous act to go in, see what you got, put it down in print, and then show it to the world.
Yes, and be willing to stand up to the criticism that comes with it as well. I didn't think of it so much as this generous gift to the world necessarily, as more like it was a process that I could refine myself with. Then the me that results is the gift to the world. The book's like a calling card. I really think everybody should write a book at some point in their life, whether it's 10 pages or 1,000, because the writing is a great clarification process. And you really hit the nail on the head. Discovering yourself and how it applies to you, how it applies to your life, and in simple terms, how does this make my life better? How does me studying this make my life better? I think as clinicians, what we're really trying to do is simplify difficult things for our clients and our patients so they feel better at the end of the day.
Well, and maybe for ourselves too, because, you're also a clinician, you work as a massage therapist. It's so easy to get confused in clinic. We think we're seeing something, oh yeah, this is what this is. And then you get started on working on it and you realize, wait, there's a lot more here. And then there's all the damn stories in our head.
Right, all the theory. And that's something that I've heard you say multiple times that really has stuck with me, is that when I'm in clinic and I think the theory suggests that I should do this or that, I'm fucked.
I mean, there's other people, maybe theory works for them, but yeah, for sure. When I'm starting to lean on, well, according to the books, I know I'm not paying attention to what's in front of me.
Yeah. Isn't it all about engendering a sense of presence between yourself and the person on the table? It seems deceptively simple. We're just trying to strip away what's all the theories, all of the self-judgments, all the prejudices, all the thoughts, and just get to what's right here in front of us. When I push on this spot, when I put a needle in this spot, what arises? What's happening now? Is this helping?
Simple, not easy. Because in some way, we need to have something that guides us. So often the question comes up for me, What am I being guided by? Now, you're a very hands-on practitioner. So let me put that question to you. You got your hands on people. What are you guided by?
Well, I think when every practitioner starts on their journey, they have to be guided by the theory a little bit because the sensitivity isn't quite there yet. There's a certain expertise that comes with time just as a function of repetition and doing it. So I'd answer that question differently now than when I first started. When I first started, I was just trying to drink from a fire hose and learn as much information as I could and try to apply some of the theory to what I was doing. And as I've practiced more, I really feel that I'm guided more by an inner knowing than I am by the theory. And if anything, the theory and the thoughts that come into my mind are just supporting evidence for what I'm feeling. And in my book, I talk a little bit about how a person can start to have a conversation with their body and with different organ systems, with different limbs, different acupuncture points. And so I think about when I have my hands on a body and I press on a certain point, or I notice that a person's taking a breath, I sense this conversation happening, that when I press here, the deep breath happens. It's almost like the person's body is saying, can I have some more of that, please? Or, oh, no, I'm clenching. I'm guarded. I don't want that. That's touching on that engaging vitality sort of work, right? Whether these really replicable, simple responses from the body that tell you if you're on the right track or maybe on a different track. So the more I practice, the more I listen. The more I listen, the more I learn. And the simpler my techniques become.
Isn't that funny? I have found over time my work gets simpler too. And sometimes I think it's because I'm lazy or I'm just habituated. Here's some things, they seem to work. Oh, that worked last time. I'll do it again this time. Or, something similar, or at least that rhymes with that. And at the same time, I suspect on a good day, the work is simpler because there's a lot of external noise that I'm not paying attention to because I know I don't need to pay attention to it. The interesting thing about paying attention that I have found over the years is, yes, there's what's important and to pay your attention there. But the other side of that is, what can I, at least for the moment, push off to the side and go, this probably doesn't apply right now? Because that makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, it absolutely does. We're in the information age.
Well, are we in the information age, or are we in the age of more noise than we've ever had before?
Our problem now isn't finding information. It's sorting through the information that we already have and coming back to what's important.
Finding information.
Right. Well, hey. So we're just information seeking beings, right? We're curious. I think humans are curious.
It's interesting. Humans are information seeking beings. That's the first time I've heard somebody say that. I've heard people say we're storytelling beings. I completely agree. We're, hungry beings. We want to eat. We're sexual beings. We want plenty of that. Information seeking beings. I hadn't, until you just mentioned it, that hadn't occurred to me, but I suspect you're right. And maybe why we're so enamored with all the technology we have.
Sure. I mean, what's a story but taking all of these pieces of information and making a pattern out of them that seems to make sense to us? And we are enamored with the technology. We have more access on our smartphones than, in one day than a person 1,000 years ago would have gotten in multiple lifetimes. Our biology can't have caught up to that.
I don't know. I really don't know. For sure, our biology has evolved over time without this stuff, how this interacts with our biology. I think a lot of people are asking that question right now. And, I mean, technology has brought us a lot of great stuff. It's brought us a huge amount of trouble. So at the moment, it seems like we're throwing a lot of shade on it. Is our biology not up to it? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, for sure, that this little device that we hold in our hand is a dopamine machine like we've never had before.
So maybe as practitioners, we might ask the question, what are the clinical results that we see from technology, the overuse of technology maybe? Or do people feel better when they're on technology 24/7? Do they look better? I don't think so. Do they sound better? No. And whereas like the clinical results that we see from somebody who swims every day in a natural body of water, or that goes to sleep with the sun and wakes up with the sun, what's the result? I think it's all we can do is make these broad generalizations and say, okay, well, it's probably better to put your feet on the ground and probably not look at your phone so much. And maybe we have to even simplify that further. When I, as a practitioner, swim every day, and when I put my feet on the ground, and when I get in tune with natural cycles, man, my work seems to flow a lot easier. I seem to have a lot more energy, and I seem to be a lot less stressed than when I'm on the phone. And how can we help people learn about themselves and learn about their own cycles and their own healing journey and process if we're not exploring it also?
Well, this very much gets into a very fundamental Chinese medicine idea of yangsheng, of self-cultivation, of taking care of ourselves. If we're not taking care of ourselves, it makes it very challenging to take care of others.
Right. If we're not learning, we got nothing to teach. And we're building chi, right? By our practices, there's this whole beautiful lineage from tons of East Asian countries about chi cultivation. How do we manage our life force? How do we manage our relationships with people? There's as many practices from around the world as you can imagine, as there are people. But it seems to be a fairly agreed upon point that life force cultivation is the root of the healer's capacity to do their work. And the like even Yogananda, for example. You ever studied Paramahansa Yogananda?
I've heard of him. I have not studied him.
Well, he was from India. He came to the United States in 1920 and taught scientific breathing, yoga, meditation, etc. to Westerners, and among many other teachers in that time frame. But Yogananda said the greatest healing method is the one that stimulates the life force. Every other healing method is secondary. But doctors still need jobs. People still need medicine. There's a place for everybody and everything. But if a practitioner can tap on the life force of that person on the table, that's going to be the juiciest clinical result. What really, really supercharges that person's life.
It makes profound changes in people. I think this is why, especially if we're using needles, but also just using hands, let's just call it effective treatment, however we're applying that treatment. Sometimes people just have this look in their eyes like, I can't remember the last time I felt like this. And they so often think that it came from outside. Oh, that practitioner, they did this thing and now I feel this way. So it came from that practitioner or that method or that kind of a treatment. And that has something to do with it. But if the patient didn't have that capacity on the inside, then it wouldn't have come out. It always comes out of our patient. Even something like a surgery, which can clear up a lot of stagnation or fix some things that really need to be put into alignment, it's still that patient healing themselves and taking that in and seeing what their life force does with it that makes for the healing. There certainly is that. I've read a bit through your book. Love the title, by the way. Body Constellations. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. I just want to stick a pin in that. I'm going to come back to that. But in reading just the first part of your book, in addition to talking about self-cultivation, you talk about a very essential ingredient that we don't talk about a whole lot in Chinese medicine, although I think it's there. You talk about love.
I like how you said that. Essential ingredient. Can you weigh or measure love? You know, how scientific can you get with the concept of love? But everybody that I know knows what love is to them. Love is the binding force between things. In my view, love is what attracts particles together so they can make atoms and molecules and cells and organ systems and the whole body as it relates to other bodies. And so when I love my patient, when I love the practitioner who's working on me, there's a binding force that's happening. And it's almost a tension, right? It's the dance. If two people are dancing and there's no binding force, there's no dynamic tension, no push and pull, then the dance doesn't really happen. You know, the handshake, the best handshake is the firm one, right? Where both people are there. They're both present. Everybody knows the dead fish handshake. You know, there's no meeting, there's no sticking. And so I think, and I talk about this in the book, but if we don't love our patients as practitioners, then where's the tension? Where's the healing motive, the movement? It doesn't mean we love them romantically, obviously, but it does mean that there's care, real care.
I love your description, love as a binding force. It's one of those things I hear it and I go, oh yeah, that's right. Huh. Hadn't thought about that before.
Do you have any pets?
Oh yeah. We do. We got a few cats.
Yeah. And I would assume that you love your cats.
Oh yeah, they're great.
So you're bound to those cats.
True enough.
You're bound to them. And it could even be said that you have an attraction to them. They're attracted to you. They're attracted to you because you love them back.
Well, and we feed them.
Yeah. That's a binding force. Isn't food the surest form of love? That's love. Man, tell you what.
Tell you what. What part of the country are you from?
Central Texas.
Central Texas. Tell you what. We say that kind of thing in Missouri here too. Tell you what.
I've noticed the similarity in accents. I really have. On that point of love, I really have to reference the book, let's say, because it just occurs to me. Let me know if you thought that this was accurate or if you have a different perspective. All of our hairball of East Asian medicine is a result of each one of those practitioners' individual love for their patients. Why would you write something down if you didn't care that it was shared? Love for themselves, love for their patients, love for their communities, love for their country.
Their students, doctors in the future, passing along something that's useful to other people.
Right. I don't know of another motive force that's strong enough to cause somebody to dedicate their entire life to a subject or to a pursuit of knowledge like that. I mean, you got to love it. Otherwise, you become a shell of a person who's just following the theory and applying the theory, as you said.
Well, I wonder how well it works over time if you're taking the ideas of other people, let's call it theory, applying it through some kind of mechanical way of applying it, and not having a dialogue with it, not learning back from it. There's a big brouhaha in our profession about how many people are not practicing after 5 years. And I wonder if a piece of that is like not taking the training wheels off, like not being able to take the theory and then see where it's pointing and then just go for that. I don't know. I don't know. I know, I mean, attrition from professions. I mean, I know a lot of ex-lawyers as well. So not to get into the politics of the whole thing, because I don't want to do that, but I want to underscore the point that you make, that if you love it, if it starts to speak to you, if we bring that caring and connection into our work, it's like having cats around. It generates a warm, fuzzy feeling.
It's the spice of life. The structure of theory and methods and historical basis, tradition and practice, that's all the box. That's the hive, right? But it has to be filled with the honey of love and practice and work, and everybody's working together towards this common goal. The structure and the juice is necessary, I think. And
well stated. That's really well stated.
thank you. But it's simple, right? I think anybody who's listening can understand that. I think often we want to overcomplicate things. Well, why is there such an attrition in the acupuncture field or the massage therapy field? I can tell you this for sure. Massage therapists, I've heard different statistics, but the most recent one I heard is that the average massage therapist lasts 7 months.
Wow.
Like very short time.
I'm going to call 7 months not even getting started.
I agree. Absolutely. And I'm not sure why that is. I think I'm with you on my lack of certainty on why that is. But I think one good reason why that might happen is because a person got into it for the wrong reasons. Not necessarily the over application of theory relative to practice and understanding, though that must be the case also. But I think that people often get into these fields thinking that either they're going to make a lot of money or that it's going to be this cure-all fix to people's problems, or that I know a lot of massage therapists for sure get into it because they want a flexible schedule. They want to make all their money on 2 days a week and go and travel the rest of the time. And if we're talking about clinical results, as you know, it takes hours in the clinic. It takes thousands and thousands of hours of dedicated presence, focused presence, to begin to see clinical results. What is it they say, that it's like, the 10,000 hour rule, sure. But to become, from my understanding, a proficient acupuncturist, it takes like 30 years to become really proficient.
I don't think it takes 30 years. Well, maybe it takes you 30 years. If you're slow like me, maybe it takes 30 years. My suspicion is after 10 years, something kind of quickens.
Do you think that's a function of hours in the clinic, or do you think that's just a growing and a maturing as a person?
Probably a bit of both. That's a really good distinction.
Yeah, we start this process from different points in our life. I know massage therapists who started when they were 17 years old. And I know massage therapists that started when they're 50. I interned myself to a chiropractor for a while who started doing massage work after he'd been a chiropractor for 22 years. Full-on practice, clinical practice for 22 years, and then became a massage therapist.
Wow, that's an interesting transformation. And yeah, I mean, what he brings to the game from the get-go would be very different than a 22-year-old just graduated. I'm going to make me some money 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And, there's also that thing about, are you learning from your experience? I think it was Bruce Lee, and I'm going to slaughter this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Something to the effect of, you can practice a kick 10,000 times, but if you're practicing the same kick, you're not learning anything. Right? It's like you got to do it. And all right, how do I recalibrate that? You do it again. Oh, yeah, do this. Or do it again. Yeah, move the balance like that. Right? If you do the same thing over and over without somehow learning from each iteration, then, yeah, I suspect not much happens. But if you learn from each iteration, that's when stuff starts to happen. And that just takes time and attention.
And intention, exactly. If I can help you out with that quote, which I'm probably not going to get it perfect either. But I love the way that you said that, because it's almost like I think we arrive at the same point like we always do. But he said something like, I don't fear the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks one time. I fear the man that has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, break it down to what is the kick that we're practicing as clinicians? Well, the kick is somebody comes into our office and they have a problem. We get paid to solve problems for people.
That's right. People don't care about acupuncture. They don't care about massage. They don't care about any of it. They care about getting rid of the thing that they walked in with.
Yeah. At a reasonable rate and in a reasonable amount of time to them. That's what they pay for.
Hopefully a pleasant experience.
Hopefully so. Yeah. So the kick we're practicing, somebody comes in, they got a problem. And our kick is to, as best as possible in their language and in their experience, make a difference in the problem that they came in for. And maybe if we're doing that well and we can see how it's important to them, they can feel how important it is to us. And they learn a whole lot more than they bargained for.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. In their language and with their experience. High five, man. Yes, I think that's really important. And I say that because I wasted years. Maybe they're not wasted because hopefully I learned from it. But I spent years trying to teach people a little bit of basic Chinese medicine 101 so they could understand what was happening. Well, that time might have been better spent trying to understand what happened for them in their language so that I could follow them more closely in their healing process. Here's another place where I screwed up a lot. They'd come in and say things like, well, I'm a lot better now. And I'd be like, oh yeah, that acupuncture really helped. And I'd ask them to tell me more. And they go, well, I went to my chiropractor and they did this and that, and now my problem's gone. And, my ego wants to say, well, yeah, but what about the acupuncture? But the healer goes, oh, they're cottoning to this thing that they got from their chiropractor. Okay, let's follow that. Maybe there's something I can do with acupuncture that will ride along with whatever they're thinking in their experience and in their language so they get better. Yeah, that is such a vital piece. And, it's one of the things that I think you bring out in your book. You've got your own way of storytelling. You got your own language. You got your own perspective that you brought into this because, clearly you're interested in the work you do. You've been thinking about how to talk about it. And, you do that in the book. But again, own perspective, own language, which brings me back to the title of your book, Body Constellations. Constellation is a great word. I think about being a kid and looking at the night sky, and you're hanging out with people that are older than you and they go, see the Big Dipper? And you're going, huh? What? Right? And then they point it out to you and you're like, wow, is it always up there? And then they point out Scorpio or Orion or, something. And it's like, wow. So tell me about constellations and how how you brought that into your book and into your work. Tell me more about constellations, man. I like stars.
Yeah, you're a sailor, right? So you know how to navigate by the stars.
I am a sailor, but I'm not that kind of sailor. So I don't do like big ocean passages, although I've had people on the podcast that do. No, I'm a I'm a dinghy sailor, and not dinghy like crazy, although I might be crazy too. But I sail small boats, like small racing boats around the buoys, that kind of thing. So we are paying attention, but like not to the stars. It's more like to the wind and where it's coming from, and where there's more pressure and where there's less pressure, and that kind of thing.
Sure. Okay, so you're looking at patterns and you're following those patterns, right? And isn't that what a constellation is? So the title, maybe we can start there. So the title of the book is Body Constellations, the Meridian Map to Awakening Body, Mind, and Spirit. So the channels, from a practitioner standpoint, man, that's like the great mystery, right? It's where novice practitioners begin and master practitioners end.
I don't know if we end. This channel thing it keeps unfolding.
Yes, it does. And I think the reason it keeps unfolding is because of how many layers of truth are encoded in this channel map that we've created for ourselves as a lineage of East Asian medicine practitioners. So when I look at a map of the channels, I look at my wall chart that has the channels up. I see dots, i.e. points, connected by lines. And to me, that screams like, oh, that's a constellation right there, right? Because we look up at the night sky, as you said, and there's the Big Dipper. Well, how do we tell the Big Dipper? They're points of light connected by imaginary lines, right? It's totally imaginary. We just made it up. We said, well, that's a consistent enough pattern that we drew some lines in between there and said, that's a map, and we can follow that, and we can navigate our transatlantic cruises by those stars, right? They're that consistent. And I think the channels are that consistent as well. Consistent enough that we can sort of navigate ourselves by. But they do change positions. When you look at a constellation in the sky, it looks static. But as we know, those stars are spinning at rates that we can't even possibly imagine. They're so fast. And that's part of what gives us this sense of wonder. You look up at the night sky and somebody older says, that's the Big Dipper. And you're like, well, what's the Big Dipper? And they say, well, our sun? Yeah, well, think about like 40,000 of those suns up there that are all spinning really far away, as far as you could possibly imagine, way further than you could ever travel in your lifetime or in 1,000 lifetimes. We're seeing the reflected light of those thousands of dying suns, and they appear to us as the Big Dipper in a pattern that's navigable, followable, replicable. So what comes to my mind when I hear that is like, oh shit, I am tiny. I am never going to understand all this, but I have a place where I can start right now. And so I thought that really kind of hits the nail on the head for our journey as practitioners. We're never going to understand everything about the channels, not only because they're so far away and so close and so deep and so wide, but because they change. We're information seeking, we're pattern seeking. And so we as a tradition wrote this map, drew this map, and started talking about it for all these thousands of years. Because even if we don't understand the channels, we know enough about them to navigate by.
Even if we don't understand them, we know enough to navigate by. It's a good enough map.
It's good enough. And I like good enough. Good enough gets results.
Yeah, well, another thing we like to say here in Missouri, I don't know about you in Central Texas, but we like to say, get her done. Get her done. And, there's something satisfying about knowing that we know and feeling, I'm speaking for myself, feeling like I understand. It's part of me that really likes that whole intellectual thing. Probably because I'm a small, scrawny guy and I was never good at sports in high school, so I had to use my brain because I couldn't use my brawn. I didn't have much brawn. So, I lean toward that intellectual. So there's that. But being able to let go of that a little bit, not get rid of it, just hold it loosely. I don't need to know everything. I need to know just enough, like you say, to get started. Isn't that so often the trick with so much is we're thinking about the ending. Oh, I might get, if I become a massage therapist, I can work 2 days a week, make a lot of money, and I'll get what I want in life. And then you get out there and you realize, oh shit, not at all what I thought. But yeah, like being able to just get started, like start. That, I think if there's a superpower in the world for anybody, it's being able to start.
Isn't that's the strongest barrier for sure. For me, I can speak to experience. It's just starting something. So like with this book, who in their right mind has a half-cocked idea to write a book about a subject that they're barely familiar with or haven't even really started mining? Well, I think that when I started, I gave myself permission to learn with a full throttle curiosity.
I want that on a t-shirt. Full throttle curiosity.
You're going to have to write it down.
I'm writing it down. Full throttle. You know what?
Because I forget what I say.
Yeah, okay. That's the name of this podcast. That's the name of this episode.
Full throttle curiosity. There you go. So what's so curious about these channels? Well, they're made up, for one. That's very curious.
We drew some lines among the stars.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. What river is straight? You know what I mean? You tell me. What blood vessel is straight? Yeah.
It's so funny when patients have that experience of getting better and then they get worse and then they get better and then they get worse. And they're like, I thought I was getting better, then it got worse, and then it got better. And it's like, it seems to be getting better and worse. And I will take them out of the treatment room into the waiting room where we can look outside and there's trees and this and that. I go, you show me a straight line in nature. Show me one. And they're like, oh, there's no straight lines in nature. Go get back on that table.
Now, that might be the most valuable clinical tip I've ever heard.
I don't know. I mean, this is the fun of clinic, right? Sometimes stuff comes up and it's like, where the hell?
Yeah, absolutely. And really magical stuff happens, doesn't it? The stuff that we had no intention of doing or making happen, and it happens. And we just say, oh, cool. I stuck some needles in you, or I pressed on your neck. And then the next time you come in, you made up with your partner, who you've been fighting with for 10 years on and off. It's like, how can I say I did that? There's no way. And I happened to be there, and there happened to be a correlation. It said, well, okay, so you release all the tension, the excess, in other words, along the gallbladder channel, and the person gets out of their head and gets more into their heart, because they're opposites on the clock, as our practitioners will know, right? Gallbladder and heart, logic and heart, right? Logic and spirit. So you release all the excess in the logic, and then maybe that chi flows into the spirit, and then the spirit does the work. These are all just speculations.
Useful speculations based on patterns that seem reliable.
I can tell you that when I press on the gallbladder channel and I feel excess tension, more often than not, that person is overthinking things. And more often than not, they're overthinking things because they've got some bone to pick that they haven't picked.
Some bone to pick that they haven't picked. You would think they would. I mean, gallbladder is about courage. You think they would have picked that bone.
Well, it's a flood, right? Too much gallbladder chi. Way too much. They're overwhelmed by the amount of things that they can choose to do. We know it's about rationality and decision making, right? Courage, for sure. And so how many times have you gone to the supermarket and seen 20 things that you have to pick from, and you're like, oh, screw it, I don't even want to choose? People like 3 choices. Communications research and marketing research shows that people like 3 choices. That's like the optimal number of choices.
It's hilarious. I've got a nephew who lives in Holland, my brother's son. And I remember going to the supermarket with him once. I think he was like in his late teens, early 20s at that point. And we went to the supermarket to get something, and we're standing in front of whatever we went to go buy. And he's like, I have no idea what to do. Because it's like 12 different options. He's like, we only got 2 or 3 of these back home. It's like, I don't know what to do with this.
That's a gallbladder excess.
Yeah. Okay, great. Wow. Okay, I see it. So America's a very gallbladder excess, with all our choices in the marketplace.
Big time. Absolutely. And so I see more often than not, IT band tightness, lateral calf tightness, tension headaches that occur on one side of the head, just from a purely orthopedic standpoint, because people don't come to a massage therapist generally for their digestive problems. Let's say that. Now, I do have clients that come to me for that, and I do some health coaching. And since I practice more of the East Asian medicine bent of things, I tend to get people who have those sort of things. But I think the average massage therapist or body worker, people come in because they're hurt, because they're in pain. And in my experience, every case that I have has some pain, either conscious or unconscious, that's enmeshed in the pattern. So it's hard to deny the patterns that I see. And when you put your hands on the body, you put your hands on the body to assess and to feel. I think that's the greatest aid to an acupuncturist, is being able to feel with the hands.
Agreed, especially because we can so easily go into our heads. I think for me, being able to put my hands on people and just settle for a moment, like, what do my hands have to say?
Right. It's like, maybe you're familiar with Shudo Denmei.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about finding the alive point.
That's right.
And it's not usually where the textbook says it is.
Well, again, the textbook is a map. You're looking for a point. There's something around here, if it's there, because, sometimes points are asleep.
Yeah, right. Depending on the season, depending on that person's lifestyle habits. It seems like every practitioner that I've talked to knows that points move. They go deep and they come shallow, and some are further up and further down the channel. Or maybe they're not there at all. There are some people who I'll press on, like stomach 36, for example. Very common point. We use it all the time as practitioners, whether we're using hands or needles. And some people, it's like, holy shit, that thing hurts. That is tender. And some people don't feel it at all, but they feel it further down or up, on the lateral aspect of the knee. Or they can feel a radiating sensation from further up on the thigh down into stomach 36. And it's like, well, tell me about that relationship. I don't think any number of textbooks is going to be able to describe to a practitioner that sensitivity, how to achieve that sort of sensitivity, other than to just practice it, feel it, talk with the person. And I don't know where I was going with that, but I think it's that the body presents itself through simple orthopedic problems. It hurts here, being a simple orthopedic problem. My knee hurts and I need help with it. Just that pattern of where it hurts when you press on it is going to tell you a lot more about the channel system and the organ function, that combined with the pulse, maybe another manual skill, right? Very refined manual skill, which acupuncturists are quite good at usually. That's going to tell you more than any theory, just what you feel. And you say, I noticed that your middle pulse on your left wrist seems to be really, really up at the surface and jamming. It's tight, it's stringy, it's wiry, right at the surface. Gallbladder. We build these stories about, and this is just one example, of course.
Yeah, well, I think this is one of the beauties of practicing this kind of medicine. There's all these reflections, there's all these signals that we can get and put together. You're just describing gallbladder excess kinds of people. I see more than a few in my practice. And there's times people come in, they just seem like they're tight as a drum and kind of raging and just, so excess. And I put my hands on their pulse and it's like, oh my God, they're so deficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
They're just empty inside. They're like hangry at a spiritual level.
Right. And so isn't that the case? You learn it through practice. Often the excesses are what's easy to see.
Of course.
And the deficiencies are the hardest thing to see.
It takes a slightly different kind of vision. I think with practice in time, but I would say for sure, at least for me, I notice the excess first, and then I have to kind of hunt for the deficiency. And, it'll show itself, but you got to like lift up some rocks and things.
What comes to mind when you say that? Because I always like to relate this back to practical, common sense examples, right? For the people, not just the people on the table, but for us too. That when a young kid, is throwing a tantrum, would we consider that to be an excess or a deficiency?
Oh, man, that's great.
I think we'd all say that's an excess. That's up, that's out. It's young. It's exploding. Whoa, big tantrum being thrown here. Well, why does a kid throw a tantrum? Kids don't just throw tantrums just because. They throw tantrums when there's an unmet need. What need is not being met here? Either maybe that kid needs to be listened to. They had a really important idea that you as a parent maybe didn't think was that interesting or that important, but to them it was the whole world. And the tantrum calms down when you listen to them. Or maybe they needed just some gentle care and love, Maybe they got colic. The kid's throwing a tantrum, but it's because their digestive system is deficient, underfunctioning. Gases are building up. It's not moving the right way. I think you're right. I think we have to turn over some rocks. What's the thing that's not being fulfilled here? And that's that whole balance of, I don't really even prefer the word sedate, tonify and sedate, because sedate seems to me like suppressing a symptom and not filling a deficiency. So like in Sa'am acupuncture, right? Which you're more familiar with. It's all about tonifying first, generally. Enough that I get kind of the principles. I don't claim to be an expert on any of this stuff, but if I simplify it and I look at it and I look at the tonification and sedation points, tonify, then sedate. Build up your deficiencies, your constitutional lack, the thing that you're not getting, and then sedate. It works the same way when I'm working with people who are trying to lose weight. Very often people can't lose weight because they don't have the micronutrients and the hormones necessary to do all those reactions and all that work to get rid of the excess. Their body will get rid of the excess as soon as they have the capacity, hormonally, nutritionally, to lose that. Their body will take care of the process in many cases. But if you're not getting enough electrolytes, how is there enough electrical potential to make chemical reactions happen in the cell? How do you detox through your liver and your kidneys and your intestines and your skin if you don't have that life force, its electrical potential? So we build the life force, coming back to that, we build the life force up through chi cultivation practices, either ones they do at home or ones that we give them, or we reduce the blockages, increase the chi in other areas. Then the life force, the chi, takes over and the excesses can come down naturally.
It sounds so simple when you put it that way.
Why does it have to be complicated? We like to go overcomplicate things. I think that's why we have, as a culture, we have an addiction to overcomplicating things. Gallbladder excess, again.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner. Because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital chi. And that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
I'm really curious about your senses of excess and deficiency for each of the constellations. Of course, the book is available for that. I remember in reading through it, yeah, you've got some really interesting ideas. I'm going to say for me, they were a little bit challenging, but just because I've already got ideas in my head about what certain excesses or deficiencies look like. And so making room for another lens to look at the same issue through is, it takes a little bit of time. So I'm glad I've got a copy of the book. Something that I noticed that you did with the pairings of the organs, it's something all of us know if we've studied acupuncture, but usually we don't put these things together. Your entire, I'm going to say, your entire way of explaining one organ through its sort of opposite, so that you can see both the yin and the yang and the hot and the cold and the gallbladder and the heart, because we were talking about that. Your entire sense of how organs function together, at least in the book, is through the clock opposites, which again, we study about it in school. It's kind of an interesting thing, but man, you take the deep dive into that stuff. What led you to that perspective? What drew you into looking at it that way? Because we're sitting here and having this conversation right now, and you are very fluent and descriptive in, well, here's your gallbladder, and there's your heart, and here's how one's excess and the other one's deficient. You've got some clarity on that. What drew you to looking at the clock opposites as a productive lens?
Well, I think to clarify, there's also so much to be gained from looking at other pairings besides clock opposites, like you say, the more traditional approaches that an acupuncturist would look at. If you're looking at the gallbladder, of course, you're going to be looking at the wood element pairing with the liver. That's very common. And then you'll also be looking at it from a Shaoyang perspective, right? And those are lenses that are very, most acupuncturists are very fluent in.
We know that constellation.
Right. And that's, like you say, that's the idea that you have present in you. Well, I don't have the burden of 4 years of acupuncture school. You know what I'm saying?
That's hilarious. I love it.
So I can walk through the walls, so to speak, right? And I'm also, being a massage therapist, nobody considers me to be a reliable authority on the subject, per se. Because I didn't do the thing and then get the letters that got me the result of the acupuncture license. So to me, the clock opposites, what drew me to them was this. It was first an intuitive sort of understanding that when the one organ system is most active, say at 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Let's look, that clock, of course, there's no lines there, right? It's not a clearly delineated thing. Your gallbladder's working all the time. But if that clock position is happening 11 to 1, it makes sense to me through that law of polarity and yin and yang, which we all love to come back to because it's so useful, there must be another organ system that's not functioning as much at that time. It just seems so intuitive and so simple, or maybe even oversimplified. And so when I took that as a possibility that, okay, I'm not seeing a lot of literature about clock opposites and how they work together. Like you said, it's not really part of the lineage per se to look at those things. I mean,
it is in that we're shown the clock and, oh, here's the Zhu Qi clock and, oh, cool, look, there's different energy in different organs. And sometimes we'll look at things like, oh, look, they're having this urinary problem at the time of the urinary bladder. Okay, that's, that might be useful. But yes, I think you're right. It's almost more like a curiosity than often used map. But yeah, I like it. Like you said, you don't have the burden of 4 years of acupuncture school, so you can walk through walls.
Right. Yeah. And so I got to pursue my curiosity, mostly also because I'm not being paid to write this book. I'm writing it out of my own pocket, hopefully sell so many copies that I get paid for it. And I'm open to that. But like I said, it was an exploration into my own process, which I think everybody can benefit from. So I see these clock opposites. I look at each one of the organs and each one of the channels individually first. And I say, okay, well, what's the nature of the lung, for example? The start of the clock, right? And so it's 3 to 5 a.m., first thing, waking up in the morning, right? Setting boundaries. And as we know in Chinese medicine, the lung governs the immune system and the sinuses and the skin. And there's all these other relationships that are happening physically. And so I said, well, what's the nature of the lung? The essential nature of it. And I explored the literature and my own understanding and did a lot of breath work. And well, it seems to me that the lung is all about boundary setting, having flexible but not too permeable boundaries. And that quality of boundary setting, right, of being able to accept the things that we want and block ourselves from the things that we don't want. I saw that in the lung and I said, wow, this is like, if I could give an archetype name to it, give it a character, something that, that I could name it by and signify it by, well, I call it the shield. Right. That's the name of that constellation. So I said, okay, well, that's the shield. So that's what that does. And that's just for me, right? I said, okay, well, this seems to me like a good name for it. And it's a ping. It helps me remember everything that the lung's associated with because it's a storybook character, this archetype that has its own meaning and substance and poetry about it. So I said, okay, well, if this is what the shield is, what's the opposite on the clock? Well, it's the urinary bladder. So I took as a starting point and I said, okay, clearly the clock opposites are talked about, but not very much. Let me understand the essential qualities of the urinary bladder. And I did the same thing and on and on. And I said, okay, well, that's the sentinel. I said, how does that relates to the shield? Wow, these two things are kind of related. The bladder is this, it runs along the back. It's like the hackles on a dog that pop up whenever there's any sense of impending danger. The bladder channel has more points than any other channel, right? It connects through related points with every other channel and every other organ. And I said, okay, well, this is like the watcher. It's checking everything out. It's like the first line of defense. So that's the sentinel. It's looking, it's watching at the wall. So the shield and the sentinel work together, right? And they have this dialogue that's happening. They're complementary functions. And so I looked at that and I said, okay, well, those two seem similar. And then I went to the next one. I went to the large intestine and the kidney. And those became the father and the mother archetype, right? For different reasons, which I explain in the book. I said, okay, well, those things are clearly related, the large intestine and the kidney. To me, I can see these similarities. And on through the clock. And I iterated these names in a way that they would sort of make sense to me. And, oh, no, that's not quite the name. And then I changed it again. Not quite the name. I changed it again. So, oh, that's it. Right. So the gallbladder and the heart, to return to that example real quick. The gallbladder is the logician, and the heart is the mystic. So it's rationality and spirit. Rationality and spirit, they're not exclusive, they're complementary. And we talk about heart shen and how the spirit and how the heart is the emperor. And it's this like divine connection.
But what does the emperor have? The emperor has ministers to go get shit done. We often talk about that being the pericardium, but I can see how that fits with the gallbladder. You know, I so appreciate your creativity with this. Having gone to Chinese medicine school and having the burden of that 4 years of study, you know, I come away with images of like, well, the liver is the general and the spleen is the minister of grains. And I'm like, who the fuck talks like that these days? We don't even like generals, you know? You know, the emperor, we don't like kings. You know, get rid of the kings, you know, those privileged bastards. Out with the king, off with their head.
Right. It isn't king a title, right? It's a title that we gave it.
But we don't really use those metaphors. We don't really use those images in our everyday life. So I appreciate that you've taken this creative jaunt into looking into the functions, in this case through the clock, although you could have gone through any of the other ways that the channels relate. But in this way, through the clock, and like, okay, so what is the name of these things and their function in a counterbalance across the clock sort of way? It's both very creative and at the same time, Jason, it's rooted in the fundamentals of what this stuff is. You just happen to give your own language to it. And, you know, is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. You and I are having a discussion. You're explaining it to me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That follows. Huh. I'm going to go look for that in a clinic. Next time someone's all gallbladder excess on me, I'm going to get more curious about their heart.
And see for yourself. If the only thing that comes from that exploration, Michael, is that you realize that your theories and your previous approaches were more sound for you and your practice, then I would consider that to be the highest compliment that you could give me.
Well, you know, I love your phrase, full-throttled curiosity. You know, it's so true. And whether it's medicine or relationships or cooking or, you know, whatever we're doing, like, take a look. What is this? Let's explore. Maybe you learn something new. It's like, yeah, I'm going to use this. Or maybe you come up with, yeah, I dig what I got. I'm glad I looked, but I'm good with what I got. Yeah, that willingness, that openness to, let's see what else might be here. Well, I mean, that for me is the juice. It's what keeps me in clinical practice. So I appreciate that spirit of your book coming through and especially this conversation.
Man, this has been a great conversation. I'm so grateful for you.
Well, you know, the podcast exists because there's interesting people to talk to. If it was just me talking, I've got about 20 minutes of material and then I'm done. You know, but there's something about like noodling through medicine that's just fascinating. You know, especially if someone's taking the time like you to noodle through it a bit and come up with something enough that you could actually put it into a book.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well, dialogue's the oldest form of teaching, isn't it?
I suspect it is.
We're just talking about stuff.
Do you see that pattern in the sky?
Uh-huh. Whoa, that was there last night, but now it's different. It's in a different spot. Show me somebody who knows it all about Chinese medicine, East Asian medicine, body work, nutrition. Yeah, nobody.
Anything worthwhile, there's no end to it.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, hey, we should probably wind this down. I got a couple other quick questions. Okay. All right. I want to try something new. I'm trying this on you. All right. First time we tried it. I've been listening to some other podcasts lately, Barry Weiss in particular. And she always has a thing at the end. She calls it a lightning round. Just a couple of quick questions. And if I was better prepared, I would have written these down, but I don't. So I'm just going to do this extemporaneously. A couple of quick questions, lightning round, okay?
Fire away.
What's the book you're reading right now?
Tao Te Ching.
What's your most favorite book of all time?
The Prophet by Khalil Gibran.
Latest music that you went, whoa, I've never heard anything quite like this.
Rising Appalachia band. They're a folk band. Very good. So powerful.
Interesting you should say that. Yes, I heard them recently. Yeah, okay, Rising Appalachia. Okay. Favorite snack?
Plantain chips and peanut butter.
Dude, are we from the same family?
We must be. Bananas and peanut butter is good too. Peanut butter on damn near anything.
Amen. Okay. Biggest question you have about Chinese medicine?
How simple can we make this?
All right. And final lightning round question. What can bring a little more love into the world?
Loving yourself. And all your cracks and crevices and things that you don't love right now. Love those, and then the love it'll flow into the world just by our actions.
Jason Brazil, this has been a blast.
Michael Max, real pleasure.
You know, so often we look to understand our medicine by looking toward the East and maybe squint a look into the history of other doctors' experience as well. It can be fruitful for sure. So it rather tickled my funny bone to be talking to a cat from Podunk, Texas, about his perspectives. Our medicine, it has a history, but it is the way that it comes alive in the present moment that gives it its potency. I really enjoyed Jason's book. His archetypes challenged me a bit at first, and then I came to appreciate the insights that he had and the courage to write it down. Perhaps most of all, he talks about something that I think underlies many of our practices, even if we're shy to talk about it. He reminds us of the central importance of love in our work. That's a journey that I always want to take. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.